We'll go to this now. Same subject a little bit. A new op-ed calls Biden and the media electric vehicle grifters. So they broke down the numbers and found the president's plan would reduce global emissions by fewer than 2%. No, 0.2%. Let me correct that. It's even worse. Recent polling shows Americans seem to like gasoline power. Just 19% say they were very or extremely likely to go out and buy an electric vehicle. They say gas and charging stations availability are their top concerns. You have more of one, far more than you do of the other. Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor-at-large for The Spectator. Ben, I always like how you just get to the point. Why are they forcing we beautiful square people down a round hole?
Well, I think that one of the things, Harris, that is so clear to understand about this administration is that they would be doing this regardless of any of the outcomes in question. They're not doing it based on the actual science, and they're not doing it based on the actual security policy when it comes to what we can do to try to shift people in one direction or another. This is all about them micromanaging the way that people live and behave. You know, as Steve Daines sort of said there, this is one of these situations where there's more religion going on here than actual focus on the outcomes of their policy. And as Joe Manchin said, this is something that actually would make us more beholden to China in terms of relying on all the different materials that they produce that go into these cars, into these batteries that are so essential for them working. That's the opposite of an administrative agenda that would put America's interests first. And I think that that's the real thing that we need to understand about what's going wrong with this administration's energy policy.
Ben, I'm going to ask you to sit by. We have major breaking news now in Dadeville, Alabama, that Sweet 16 party where they had a massive shooting, 15 people shot, 4 killed. There have been arrests in the case. Let's watch.
They'll be entitled to an anise law hearing, which is a bond hearing that will have to occur within 72 hours. The state of Alabama will be requesting there no bond. That's up to a judge to decide, but that will be the state of Alabama's position. After that, there'll be an initial court appearance. Then there'll be a preliminary hearing, and then this information, depending on the outcome of that, will go to a grand jury. The grand jury system in Alabama and each circuit operates differently. Here in Tallapoosa County, the grand jury convenes twice a year, once in March and then once again in September. Once the grand jury is impaneled in March, they are still the grand jury for that 6-month period. We can recall the grand jury to present an indictment under special situations. That's unprecedented and hasn't been done that I'm aware of anytime recently here. This is an unprecedented situation. If we can establish the facts and are ready to present that, we will be asking our grand jury to come back in to present that. So we can move.
Alrighty, so we've been watching the very latest on this as 2 people have been arrested now. And you see that the Fifth Circuit Court there, their representative there, is moving ahead with this case. We'll follow it. Again, 15 people were shot, 4 killed in Dadeville, Alabama, that Sweet 16 party. I want to bring back now my guest, Ben Domenech. Ben, you know, previously when we were talking about energy, one of the things that always dawns on me that never gets talked about is what do we do in the interim? Because, you know, there's going to be a fight about this. We are not all going quietly into the night at the same time.
Well, I think that one of the things that we need to keep in mind about this, Harris, especially when we're talking to people who, you know, really do have the concerns that polls show us so many on the left do about the nature of the world. You think back to the people who have been saying, you know, doomsday predictions that were always, you know, a decade out or something like that over the years. I would really encourage them that actually things are getting better and there's an enormous number of positive developments that we can look at. But top-down mandates of this type of thing just don't work when it comes to managing human behavior, particularly in the United States of America. You can't have these types of government mandates force people to make decisions that they don't want to make. And I think that overall what we're going to see in the years to come is there's going to be a great coming to grips, I think, on the left, that that's not something that's going to work for them. They're going to have to try to win the argument based on market forces, as opposed to, you know, just using the kind of rule that they have, frankly, in much more authoritarian places around the world.
Yeah, you know what would help their cause? Just show us the science. And show us that you've exhausted every cause of everything else. Show us that there are no other options here. Because you got to imagine that our enemies,
Harris,
not just our competitors, but our enemies are going there.
Yeah. Harris, I just don't take anybody seriously who tries to talk about this issue, who remains opposed to the use of nuclear power. It's just something that flies in the face of everything that we know about that, as authors like Michael Schellenberger and many other experts will tell you. And that's something that I think we need to push for sooner rather than later. And again, is something that's in the interests of our own independence as an energy-producing nation.
All right. Ben, the president, again, is refusing to weigh in on information about the Biden family foreign cash grab. You know, we're up to 9 members now because there's new info. House Oversight Chair James Comer says his review of the Treasury Department's document showed 6 additional Biden family members benefiting from Hunter Biden's business deals. That's 9 total, as I mentioned. The president has long denied any knowledge of Hunter Biden's business deals. But then yesterday, this.
President Biden, is it true that 9 members of your family got billions from places like China? President Biden, did 9 members of your family get billions?
Any reaction to President Lula?
President Biden, you have response to House Republicans who say 9 of your family members got money from overseas.
Wow, it's not just the walk away, it's the runaway, Ben.
Yeah, I think that at this point, it really, I don't know what you can possibly think about the way that the world works, that you would not know that these funds coming from Hunter, coming through Hunter, and from, potentially a, Chinese-related company, and we all know there are no such things as private companies in China. They're all shot through with the Chinese Communist Party and those related officials, that you would not know that those funds would be going to different members of the family. How do you think they're paying their bills? How do you think that they're staying afloat? And the fact that, Joe Biden would stress so much, he talks about being such a family man. We understand that about him. How would he be in the dark about all of this going on all around him, all these other members of his family benefiting from these financial scenarios? We need to get to the bottom of this. And if Joe Biden was actually, if he believed what he's been saying to the American people all along, that there is nothing here, that this is somehow siloed off in a ridiculous manner from any kind of decisions or steps that he took when he was in office as vice president or throughout his career, then come forward and prove it to us. Answer the questions. Don't keep dodging and don't run away.
Yeah, it really requires the world to believe a lot of lies. And maybe they're not lies. We just don't know what the truth is. He ought to fire every attorney who's giving him this advice and all of his comms teams for not prepping him for the obvious questions that are coming. Ben Domenech, great to have you in focus. Thank you for hanging through the breaking news.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.